All righty. So, guys, this is really cool. I'm going to probably be a little rusty. This is my first dual podcast. We have Adam from Police Posts. Um, this is really rad. I'm humbled that he's on with me today. And we did a little back and forth before we started recording and just sort of did a little get to know you because this is the first time we've spoken actually face to face. So this is really cool. So thank you, Adam. Thanks for being here. Real quick, do you want to tell people who you are, what you do, and kind of give
Sure.
us your resume?
First off, Mac, thank you for what you do. I
Thank you.
think that the Zen Cop theme, the Zen Cop podcast is very important. Your approach to law enforcement is very unique. And I'm excited I can be your first. Okay.
Thanks.
I'll just go ahead and say that. So yeah, man, my name is Adam Haidary. I was in law enforcement for a short period of time, about 7 years in South Carolina. Spent 5 years on the road and then 2 years as a full-time training sergeant. And then I left law enforcement in 2020 to basically run effective fitness training full time. And then fast forward about 2.5 years, 3 years later, developing EFC with the same crew at EFT, but in addition with Mr. Jay Wadsworth, and then developing a team over there. And that is currently my full time job. As I am, I guess you could say we don't do titles, but for the sake of conversation, I'm technically the CEO of both of those entities, and then I do a little bit of consulting work for specifically for law enforcement owned companies on the business side to help them with strategy and things like that.
Cool. For those who don't know, EFC, what is that?
That is effective fitness combative. So we just call it EF combatives for short. And there we basically train cops in everything from DT, subject control, report writing, use of force documentation, and even like courtroom testimony kind of stuff. So
Cool.
it's kind of a big endeavor. It's actually really taken off here in the past year and a half.
Nice. Courtroom testimony. That's a good one. I
It
feel
is
like that's kind of a
because nobody
lacking.
does that.
No. I mean, when I was younger, I think I don't know if the new kids do it, but we used to go and just watch. We would tell the bailiff, "Hey, we're just observing for the day." Cool. And
Yeah.
after we were done with court, we would just watch some of the heavier, more experienced guys go on the stand and watch their jury interaction, watch their mannerisms, like even all the small things that you're doing before you testify, just stuff that I feel like that they don't really teach it anymore. They talk about it, but so you're East Coast, so I'm West Coast. So my academy I graduated in 2010, and I feel like even in 2010, I was hearing the same sentence for every learning domain or whatever it was. And it was, "Hey guys, this is usually a week-long class," or "Hey guys, this is usually, a 2-day course, but we're going to cram it into a 2-hour course. So this will be a 2-day. And that was 13 years ago. And I know that things haven't gotten better. So I genuinely freak out about like, well, what are they teaching them? And California is pretty rigorous. The academy itself is pretty hard. Not necessarily in terms of, I mean, physical. Yeah, it used to be. It's probably a lot softer now, but the logistics of it, they've had to sort of retool their approach because of, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm 38, and I feel like our group, we missed that like tech boom cutoff where we didn't
We did.
grow up with the social media smartphone stuff. So we have this ability to still talk to people. And
Very
now I
true.
feel like most of our trainees we get that are under 30, just it's a rarity if they know how.
Yeah, that's something that when I was a full time training sergeant, one thing that I always tell guys, I'm like, look, if I could give you a cell phone and you could talk through a traffic stop with emojis, you would crush it, right?
Yeah.
But you can't do that. That's not how it works. And I went
No.
to the academy in 2013. So here in South Carolina, every cop, regardless of agency, goes through the same academy. It's the SCCJA, South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. It's a 12-week academy. Now, it changed a little bit, kind of went back and forth from 12, I think, to 10, back to 14, back to 12. Does that all the time. But when I went, it was 12. And kind of the same thing. I think that the communication skills that at least people in my class possess were much better. Then when I got into the training world, fast forward, 6, 7 years later, man, doing the scenarios was just tough. Like
Yeah.
it was like, and I get it. It's new. You're nervous, stress, all that stuff. That's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
But it was more like just robots, like extra robots. And
Hmm.
then they also starting to compromise officer safety because they didn't want to look around. They wanted to just either look at the ground or just look at the person. They were scared to like just deviate from this, from being vigilant. And that's what I kept saying, like, hey guys, look at passengers, look at passing cars, look at people walking behind you, look at your background and this stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's right, that's right. But no, man, that's actually really funny you bring that up because that's been a pretty common discussion I've had with guys in the training realm as it pertains to newer officers that are coming up right now.
Yeah. It is pretty wild. And it's not, I don't know. I mean, we know what the answers are and I guess the goals to that they should be striving for, especially with FTOs. Like that's a field training officer. I don't know if it's the same thing for you guys, but
It is.
even our FTOs are, we have a pretty big generation gap between the guy. I would say there's probably a 20-year gap with most agencies where you see these really, really, really salty old guys who are, the quote unquote angry guys. And then you have these guys who still are maybe 2, 3 years on and they're still trying to figure out what kind of cop they want to be. And now they're teaching this cop. And I hear a lot of times, well, and it's okay to say, I don't know. That's fine. But it shouldn't be every call you go to, I don't know, man. You should have an answer. And I mean, in my opinion, FTOs, we don't have corporals at my agency, but it's the equivalent of you should have basically a buffer between that and a sergeant so you can eliminate some of the easy questions. And if it requires supervisor approval, ask away. But I feel like the clientele we're getting is sort of hit or miss. And for us in California, you get your post certificate, but you can graduate from a variety of academies. I mean, it could be community college academies. It could be
Right.
I went to Sacramento County Sheriff's Academy. That's not where I work, but that was the academy I went to, and there were a variety of other academies in the area that you could go to, and each one was very different. They all had the same, curriculum they had to adhere to, but there were other academies in the area that were easier or softer or did things differently. So it was kind of strange to sort of bounce around, and I lateraled to where I am now. But yeah, definitely a learning curve. I think that doesn't help anybody. The only one academy that we have would be CHP or Fish and Game or whatever state agency,
Right.
and our state police is CHP. So they're
Right.
kind of the only one that has a universal academy statewide.
Yeah. And so in California, you can, I mean, obviously transfer between agencies if you go to a California Post Certified Academy, correct?
Yeah, so you
Is
can
that
kind of
kind of how it
bounce
works?
around. So if you went to
Yeah.
SAC PD's academy, you could apply with Reading or you could apply with LA.
Right.
I shouldn't say it, some agencies do require you to go through theirs. So I want to say San Francisco requires that you go through their academy. Um, and if you get hired on, they'll pay your way through. They might have even if you were a lateral, like an accelerated version. So some agencies do want you to go through at least some type of training program. But like if you were going to apply with San Francisco, and I could be wrong, this is years ago, but when I was looking into it, you did have to go through their own academy to work for them.
Yeah.
But
Man, that
again, it's just sort of one of those things where even looking at Sac County, the academy now and some of the basic things that we did only 13 years ago are very different. And it's not at fault when it comes to or I shouldn't say the agency isn't at fault, because I think that when we're making things easier or softer, it's not a result of trying to make it softer on purpose. It is adapting to this new level of applicant or recruit. And especially after 2020, I really feel like anyone who was interested, like 2019-ish, you had this large group of kids who said, cool, I want to be a cop. 2020 happened, George Floyd happened, and everyone went, nope. And so we are left with you know, what would be people that probably would have been told no thank you are now getting letters of, here's your letter of intent to hire, when can you start? And those are the guys that are going into the FTO programs, and we wonder why there's this major disconnect with how they choose to become cops. And it's almost like there's just this complete lack of, I guess, not motivation. I think we're getting the kids who probably wouldn't have passed the academy passing the academies. And
yeah.
It's
and
scary.
that's and I mean I always tell people you pay what you get for,
Oh yeah,
right? So like
100%.
and that kind of pertains to law enforcement. Like this profession isn't for everybody. And for the record, I I left like my believe my leave day. I think I was like 3 weeks before George Floyd even happened.
Oh wow.
So like yeah, I had left, and then a month later George Floyd happened, and and people were like, "You lucky motherfucker."
Yeah.
Um, and but two, like kind of at one point, I felt bad. I was like, man, like because we had riots where I worked, and those guys were downtown locking people up, dealing with that. I had one of my best friends is a canine sergeant here with the city. And he came by my house that next night and was like, "Hey, bro, like they gave me this old ass fucking ballistic helmet. Can I borrow yours?" I was like, "Yeah." So I gave him my ballistic helmet. He pulled up in his cruiser. And he had a fucking like cinder block. He was a canine guy, and he was like, "Dude, they were throwing shit at the dog. The dog was freaking out." Like he was like, "Dude, it was absolutely insane." I felt like so fucking useless.
Yeah.
Um, which sucked. But I was like, bro, take whatever you need. Like you need extra magazines, bullets, like whatever you fucking guns, whatever, just take everything. And but yeah, man, but like, I don't know what it's like to police right now. And I know it's different from when I was in to kind of where it is now. But we have a lot of guys on the police post, EFT, EFC team that are active cops. And they always keep me up to speed on kind of things that are going on now. I would say that the administration, like the same bullshit probably still exists. Obviously it's probably a little more political now, if anything. I know you being out in California is always a little spicy and probably a little different out there. um as it is here in South Carolina, which is we're a pretty pro police state, for the most part. And I would say again, I have a lot of guys that work in California, and they're like, dude, my community loves cops. Like I'm like I go downtown and people want to buy me lunch and like take pictures with the kids and stuff. I'm like, bro, it's great. And he's like, but now you go to LA and it's not like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where people see what it is now, and plus, like I think the world of social media, like kind of like we were discussing prior, is it also paints a picture of what the profession is not. Sometimes like people think that, oh, cops are out here just power hungry dudes doing this stuff. And if you're thinking about going into law enforcement, like, well, I don't want to be associated with that kind of movement. Like, but in reality, like I know thousands of cops, dude. I've met thousands of cops. I've trained with thousands of cops, and I don't know a single one that's really like that. I'm maybe on the street, but like talking to them in person, yeah, there's an ego, whatever. It's like the whole alpha bullshit. But like I I I think that social media almost does the profession an injustice sometimes. Um that's at least my take on it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think, and after looking at, I always look back to like history, like, okay, Rodney King, cool. What happened? How did it happen? That was all
Right.
really organic because it was pre social media, pre internet. I mean, shit, there wasn't even, it was newspapers and live TV. And we go to today where my buddy texted me from, he texted me a TMZ link, and it was the original video of Chauvin and Floyd. And all his text was, is just, this looks really bad. And I watched it and I was like, holy shit, did he die? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really bad.
Yeah.
And I would say within hours, it was international news. Within a week, it was, I'm sorry, international news within a week. And after that, it was just nonstop.
Hell.
And it gives, so for social media, my agency was a little hesitant. This is years ago, to start a Facebook page and do all this stuff. But the more we were talking about it, it gives us a voice. And I'm sort of pro social media between like the extreme TikTok cop and then just what it's supposed to be baseline.
Yeah.
I'm kind of right here
Right.
in the middle to where we
Sure.
can use it to showcase and recruit um, all the good stuff. But it is pretty wild to see just how far we've come in terms of what people can just basically not even assume but know is fact. Like, I know right now that cops are bad. It's 2020. Most people who were neutral are now going to favor, yeah, cops are probably bad. And I think with the national average, and don't quote me on numbers, but it's in a lifetime someone will get pulled over twice. And in those scenarios where you get pulled over by a traffic cop, the likelihood of that traffic cop not being a dick, but just sort of being a traffic cop, we all know him. That's that person's perception for the rest of their life. So, oh yeah, I met a cop this one time. He was a dick. Well, what happened? I was doing 90 in a 65 and he gave me a ticket. Okay. Well, think of the scenarios though, where we get to showcase the good stuff. And it's, it's the, just sort of the reality of that we retain the negative contact more than the positive. But like, no, I agree. I think 99% of the people I work with are good people. There's a couple of people who have a chip on their shoulder, but that's going to be anywhere. Sure. But I really feel like the far majority of cops got into this job because they're humble, and the end goal is to help people. Like, that's really what we like doing. Yeah. And I think every time we go through this sort of pendulum swing, like with the George Floyd incident, we have to now start from scratch. And this start from scratch is like bedrock scratch. This is
it was deep. Pretty bad, man.
Yeah. And I don't think we're going to see society fully accepting us anytime soon, but I would say at least 10 years to get to where we were before 2020.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to your thing about the agencies utilizing social media, I think it's a good thing. But I do agree, like there is a line, but like, I'm not a fan of TikTok cops. Like if you're going to help the community or do your community policing, like actually engage with the community. You setting up your phone in your patrol car, doing a lip singing dance isn't helping anybody. Now, maybe I'll say, oh, well, they're humanizing the badge. I'm like, yeah, what does that really even mean? Like go meet people, go talk to people within your community, during your shift, like go eat lunch, like go talk to, interact with the community. That's what I think community policing is, not filming yourself on a fucking phone. Like I'm sorry, it doesn't do anything. One, you're spending all this time trying to memorize like a movie quote or a dance, as opposed to like, why don't you read some case law or watch some defensive tactics or try to, dry fire. Fuck, who cares? Like it doesn't matter, but do something that's going to make you a better cop. But, I think that the social media side of things, like, especially just like you said with George Floyd occurring, really just opened up a whole different can of worms. And, one thing I've learned running police post with my team is that most people, if you've never been a cop or been around cops, you are completely clueless about use of force. You're completely clueless about case law. And cops get very frustrated when people are like, well, you don't get it. And it's like, no, dude, this motherfucker did not go to the academy. This person has no idea what case law even is. The person doesn't even know what a Supreme Court is. Like you have to understand where people come from. And this is why articulation and social skills, like we were talking about, which people now do lack, like they just get mad. It's like, you don't know this about, you don't know like de-escalation of force. It's like, no, I'm a barista. Like, you know what I mean? Like you shouldn't expect them to know. And so that's kind of where like I try to tell guys, like, instead of just being like they're anti-cop, we'll find out if you care and are willing to sacrifice your time, maybe find out why. Like, did they have a bad interaction with the cop? Because that may have happened. Like I've been pulled over multiple times, not in uniform, and I've been ticketed before, and I know what it's like to be on the other side of that door. So like, I'm not going to be that guy. Like, hey, bro, what are you doing? I know I was speeding. Like, go ahead and get my ticket, get me on my way so you can get back doing your fucking job. I get it. Like, you don't want to have a conversation with me. I don't need a lecture from you, and you don't need to lecture me. Like, but this is the thing, man, is I think that kind of going back to the FTO side of things, like, just like you talked about that gap, like my FTO he had a flip phone, bro, when I started. Like, so social media wasn't even a thing, right? Like not on his watch, and that kind of gap can also cause frustration and sometimes increase the saltiness. Right. Yeah. And so now what is that new cop seeing? They're seeing a salty guy who's just angry, probably doesn't like the administration that much because of some issue that the case may be. Maybe the guy's overweight. Maybe he doesn't train that much. Maybe he's just a subpar cop. And that's because that does exist. Subpar FTOs are one of the most dangerous individuals in law enforcement, because you are literally molding a future cop. So this is why, like, people sometimes cops in particular have a hard time checking themselves.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where I think you do a good job with your platform on trying to bring that to the surface is like, hey, you can be an experienced dude. You can have 5, 10+ years in the profession. You can have 20 years in the profession, but that doesn't mean you've experienced everything. That doesn't mean that you know everything. Right. But like, if your goal is to better the community, then you need to raise these new cops that are super happy to be here for the most part. They're super stoked to be new cops. Right. And you don't want to shit on that parade. And it's the last thing you want to do because then it's going to reflect in how they place within the community that you then live in. So that kind of, to kind of come full circle, it's like social media is great. I think how it needs to be integrated. And there's some agencies that do a really good job, dude, especially in California for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, and my big thing is I always kind of look back to what used to work. And in the mid 90s in California specifically, we had a lot of pop projects and stuff, and it was taking, especially in Sacramento, you would take a cop and they would get assigned to a beat, but the beat wasn't um, large. It was small, but with the intention that you got to get involved. You got involved with community members, stakeholders, and I think that that's the only real way we're going to develop faith again. I mean, social media is powerful, but I agree. There is something to be said about just sitting down and talking to people, having lunch, going out of your way to go to certain things, go to certain meetings, just show up. You'd be surprised how many people will talk to you if you go to a community meeting. Talk to your supervisor. Hey, can I flex my time? I want to go to this, Parks and Rec, whatever meeting. I want to go out. They'll say yes. And if they say no, then push for it from someone else. And
Yeah. Or just go
I
anyways.
always tell people to make reasonable requests within their agency,
Right.
because I feel like so many cops are frustrated because they're getting denied for training, or they're getting, whatever it may be. But look back and think, is this a reasonable request, or am I asking for something that I know is not going to happen? And, everyone is tight for money. Everyone's, the budget is a huge thing. But there's so many free classes too. I always like try to push that there's so much free stuff. And I mean, some agencies you have a per diem where you have to fill out, like they have to pay you for your lunch or whatever. But if it's out there, go. And training is one of those things where I think once you pass, I did it when I was, probably my 6, 7 year. I thought, oh, I'm good. I don't need any more training. I don't need this. I don't need that. And I said, as a primary for a pretty righteous DV. And I remember going to jury trial and just going, oh my God, I don't know anything. And just sort of having to take a step back. And then I really dove into, all the small things that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And for the newer guys, like, especially as a detective, like we'll tell them, hey dude, do you want to work this? If you can, great. Do you want to do the paper for the warrant? I'll help you. Like, you can help me too, but this is the only way you're going to learn. And you'll hear the most common phrase, like, hey, I've never written a search warrant. It's like, all right, cool. Well, we all were there at one point. So, take advantage and learn. But right now I feel like so many people are afraid to do something. And you have that old FTO mentality of, I'd rather have to pull you back than push you forward. And right now,
Right.
I don't even think the FTOs want to push forward because they're scared of being labeled as mean. Because not just at my agency, but others where people complain, my FTO was mean to me. He was saying things that were, I mean, shit, when I was on FTO, you were lucky if it was abusive, but with good intent, because you were learning. The guy wasn't being a dick, but he also wasn't being Mary Poppins. This was he was preparing, he or she was preparing us for the worst case scenario. And I think that even the majority of the FTOs today, I'm not knocking their time on, but I don't think that they've experienced enough to be FTOs yet. And now they're being
Yeah.
tasked with these educators.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about the turnover rate right now in law enforcement, it's pretty quick. Like I know a lot of
Very, yeah.
guys, it's like what, 3 or 4 years now or something like that, and maybe even shorter than that now. So you have some guys that have 3 years on that are now teaching new cops. I'm pretty sure for the first 2 year after I got out of the academy, I don't know what the fuck was going on. Like
Nope.
I was like, I always tell people, I'm like, hey, you get 2 solid years in, like you have an idea, right? Like, and then I would say like 5 years on, like, okay, you know what's going on, like, and then you can kind of progress from there, right? I said, but like, you brought up a really good point about as it pertains to trying to do something, whether it's writing a search warrant, writing a report, booking somebody in jail, whatever the case may be, filling out a booking report. I think the phrase "I don't know" has a negative connotation, right? And because it's like, I don't want to be embarrassed, I don't want to get in trouble, and this is why sometimes you see cops, and it's not always a use of force. They get in trouble for either like poor documentation or improper documentation, and it's not because they're bad people. It's not they were trying to hide something. It's because they didn't know. They didn't want to ask questions because they didn't want to either feel dumb or maybe they weren't trained properly, right? And that's a huge thing. Like, you're only going to do so much during FTO phase, right? You're not going to experience everything. Like, and this is kind of where I think when you get with those older salty guys, where like they're just like, you should know how to do this, just like you said. Some of them are really good, dude. I had one FTO who was amazing. He's he's still a cop, and he was great, and we ended up riding together all the time. Like, just because I was like, dude, we kind of hit it off. He taught me a lot about law, like traffic law, drug, like all this stuff. He was just a plethora of knowledge, and so I kind of stuck to him because like, man, this dude, like, I'm learning so much from this guy. As it pertains to maybe like other guys I'd ride around with, were just like, meh, like, I'm here filling out paperwork. Hey man, how you doing that? Man, it's just super easy. You do this, but they wouldn't show you how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that FTOs need to be intentional. And I think that's a very important word, because I think they don't quite understand the capacity and how they affect someone's future. Like,
Oh, for sure.
and then telling them, hey, if you don't know, like, fucking ask, because there's times where, bro, I didn't know 100%, bro. Like, booking someone in jail for the first time, fucking clueless. I was like, I brought the paperwork in, and the fucking jailer's like, just kind of looks, because like she knew I was new, and she just looked at me just like, she just kind of handed me paper. She didn't say a word. So I was like, so I need to fill. She's like, 3 copies. I was like, yes, ma'am. Like, just I was trying to do what she said because I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then kind of after that, you kind of learn. Now, I learned, but it was a safe way to learn. It wasn't like, hey man, we're gonna throw you in if you fuck this up, like, and it goes to court, like, you could be charged.
Yeah.
And I think that's why guys are maybe scared to ask, is they don't want to feel stupid. And they're also just like, I'm going to do the best that I can. And, it's not always about use of force. The fucking paperwork can fuck you just as much.
Paperwork, documentation. I mean, all
Dude.
report writing, that's one of those things where we're at now in our investigations office. We see all of the, new guys' paper come in, and you kind of, sometimes you look at it and you go, oh, no, so it's not horrible, but I've talked to guys at other agencies where stuff's getting approved that should have never been. And once it's approved. That's it. And, depending on the system you have, it's very hard to go back and change things. And it also looks really bad. But the FTO thing, I really can't stress enough. Like, when I feel like they kind of feel like they're just babysitting, and we need to get away from the babysitting mindset and focus on the educator mindset. You are a training officer. So your job isn't to assist, your job is to educate and to teach, and anyone can hang out with someone for 12 hours and keep them safe. I mean, that's ultimately one, that's the baseline, but a good FTO will take them to calls that they know are going to be shit shows, or take them to areas, make them go to calls. If they're good on traffic stops, cool. Stop doing traffic stops. We're done. We're going to go to this burglary because the other day you almost shot your partner, and I'm going to tell you why. And, utilize those scenarios that present themselves in real time within safety. But I just feel like, and also the one thing that I'm noticing too, this is not just state, but nationwide, is people don't, the new generation, ages probably 25 to 30. And I reference my time when I was younger. We were on nights, and everyone knows that nights, it's either busy or it's dead. And when it's dead, you're going to 98. That's meet up for us in California. You're going to window up and just chill out because you don't know what's
69 and window up. Yeah.
Yep. And nowadays, but we would also go around and just be batshit crazy for half the night too, because it was fun. And we enjoyed, we were so prolific as our weekend graveyard team that the bad guys started to know when we weren't around. I mean, that was just, but it was so fun. And we didn't necessarily even arrest people. We would just hassle them so much that they stopped fucking around and did their shit somewhere else. And that was kind of the objective. Yeah. Now though, you have these guys who will park and they will wait. They will be reactive, not proactive, and they will wait for the call to come out. They'll handle it and go right back to where they were. And when we actually talk to some of the local turds, they know exactly what gas station you're at. They know exactly where your spots are, and they will wait till they see you there and then go get busy. And you'll be minutes away when seconds count. And I just feel like the mentality though is fear based, but I talked about this in one of my episodes. There's not a lot of verbiage and policy that says you have to do anything. You have to go to work. You have to be in a car, but there's no like checks and balances when it comes to your proactivity. And there's a lot of guys who will point that out very quickly to say, no, 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 I don't have to do anything. So that's
Yeah.
another
And that's kind of where,
element.
yeah, I 100% agree. And well, one, I think that's going to be on like an individual basis, right? Like
Sure.
some guys just love the job. Like I love getting into shit. Like we searched it out, you know, um, and that's how I always was. Now, sometimes like sergeant would be like, "Hey, you guys need to just like relax a little bit," you know. And then I was like, "All right, cool. I go work with the county guys. We go down south, sit on dope house, whatever the case may be, get into a pursuit over here, and it's like, hey, all right, go back up north." Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's kind of one of those things where I think it's on an individual basis, but I would also say that the agency standpoint, sometimes I feel like nowadays, at least from what I'm hearing, is a lot of them are telling them to not be overly not proactive, but just like overly aggressive. And that I think that's a shame, because I know I had a fire, man. Like I had a fire. I loved getting into shit. And that's just how I met a lot of cops from different agencies, on backing them up on calls, doing that kind of stuff. Like I absolutely loved that shit. And then it kind of just got into hey guys, like you're doing great work, but just, kind of don't be too aggressive. That fucking word aggressive. And I'm sure you've heard that in California a lot, but I think that also kind of uh put a little water on the fire, man, because like guys, younger guys especially, like I started when I was 23 years old. I mean, 23 years old, right out of college. I was like, wait, so you're telling me I got to go to the academy and I get to drive a fucking Crown Vic as fast as I fucking want and shoot as much as I want and do a bunch of cool shit? Like, fuck a well paying job. Like, that sounds cool. I want to do that. And then you get out and you're like, hell yeah, I'm ready to go. And then all of a sudden you just fucking throw shit on the fire. And it's like, damn, what did you just do to that guy who was like, this is what he's wanted to do, is be a cop. And now you take him and he's like wants to be super proactive, and you just fucking basically tell him no. What is that going to look like in 4 years? Well, he's going to probably fucking leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be one reason why we're not seeing retention. Like obviously, besides the money, the political climate, maybe some of the leadership, which I think is a huge also discussion too, like just like the leadership side of things. But just from the overall like agency's approach to crime, like I think that I became a cop to serve my community, right? And one way people can do that is to reduce the amount of crime within that area.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of forget that, and that's, obviously society doesn't like sometimes how that's done. But again, they're clueless because some of them are baristas and they don't understand use of force or case law, and it kind of goes back to that whole circle.
Yeah, I think the word society is pretty heavy when you think about what is. If the average person, we keep saying barista, that's a good example, but just someone who, let's just call them, it's just a mid 20-year-old working at wherever, and the assumptions that come with it are pretty outlandish when it comes to the stuff that we deal with, but the expectation of society, or more so the understanding, is that the stuff that we have to do is unpleasant, and our existence is based on a negative context. We don't exist because good things happen. We exist because bad things happen. And sometimes in those scenarios, we have to do bad things to bad people in order to resolve an issue. And I think it was I don't know his first name, but the Survive Policing, he talked about de-escalation recently, and it was talking about a shooting.
JT.
Yeah.
JT.
And that is de-escalation. We have stopped something from continuing, even though it's the unpopular or, violent way to do it. We have now stopped that. And what's funny is that we will be judged by the aftermath of, pick your incident versus all the good things that we've done. And I can't sit here and talk about the stats for the numbers of active shooters that cops have stopped in California. I keep track of them because I see them and I can know, cool, this was stopped because of XYZ. But it won't make the news. The shooting that occurred will make the news, and the lack of response and how long it took. And, that's one of those things where, especially in California, the county where I work is pretty conservative. We're well liked, but everywhere around us is pretty bad. And even down south, you essentially have Gotham and no Batman, and you have this out of control force. And now people are saying, well, what are you going to do about it? And they're expecting a police force like LAPD, who is, I forget how many thousands of bodies short. Now they want them to come in with a vengeance and clean everything up with the lack of training, lack of everything, that the trainees that we're talking about, the new guys. It's if that happens, we will have a repeat of George Floyd all over again, because the reason why Derek Chauvin and George Floyd interacted was essentially I think it was a misdemeanor, but the end result was bad tactics. And I'm not giving him a pass. It was a combative subject, all of it. But there were things that could have and should have been done that didn't happen,
Well,
that probably would have made that scenario. It probably wouldn't have even made the news.
no,
And
no, yeah, no.
and it's only a matter of time before we see it again with some new kid who was undertrained, scared, and pretty much just fucks up and does something intentional or unintentional. Most of the time it's unintentional, but
Correct.
the aftermath, it doesn't even matter at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something I talk about too. You're talking about de-escalation. I always have a phrase sometimes, and a lot of people who don't understand, use of force, what that can pertain. I'm like, hey, de-escalation can come at you at 1,200 feet per second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't quite understand what that means, but this is the fact, and you said it perfectly. Like, people don't call cops to come to a barbecue and have a good time, right? And my buddy Travis, he travels the country talking about mental health for first responders. He was a Marine, he was a cop here in the Charleston area, and he was also a firefighter. And there was a really bad um, fire here, and we had 9 firefighters die in one building at one
Oh,
time.
wow.
And it was he was there, and so he now travels the country talking about mental health for first responders. And he actually just put up a post, and it was something along the lines of this, like, why they don't, like, people watch the show Cops or Live PD or whatever. What they don't show? The raped babies, the murders, the violence. They show guys getting pulled over for speeding. They show some kid who lost his mom at the park fair. Like, they don't show you the shit that cops actually respond to. Because why? It's too graphic for TV,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like, people sometimes have this misperception, like you said, the whole George Floyd situation, bad guy, bad tactics. Again, like, the whole situation should have never happened. Like, just like you said, like, it should have never fucking happened. And it was very frustrating to watch that, because it's like, come on, bro. Like, duh. Like, fucking duh, right? And, again, like, teach its own. Like, again, whether it was fentanyl or him or whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. The fact of the matter is, like, you shouldn't have done it, bro. Like, it could have been handled so many different ways, and it just wasn't. And so, here we are, right? And
Yeah.
so this is kind of what it comes down to. Is, like you said, like I think that the training, like the foundational training that cops get, going back to the academy stuff, is so important. And just like you said, like, California is pretty long academies, right? You guys are what, like 18, 22 weeks probably, if
Yeah,
not
it's about
longer?
6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, here it was you have your pre-academy, usually that's at your agency, and then you go to the 12-week state academy, and then you get out to go to your FTO or whatever your academy has, or excuse me, what your agency has there. And so it's not very long, right? So maybe a total of 5 months, right? So a little bit shorter than yours, but, like, what can you accomplish in 5 months? Like,
Mm-hmm.
probably not a whole lot. Now, I was taught PPCT. We all know that's complete garbage. But after I left the academy, there was no, like, oh, we know it's garbage, we're going to now change it completely. it was just like, oh, we're going to give you 2 hours
Yeah.
once a year to
Hmm.
then hope you become a better cop. Even though, sorry, what we taught you was complete shit. We're going to try to make you a better cop in 2 hours over the course of the next 27 years. So I'm like, okay, 27 times two, that's not that long.
Mm-mm.
Like, so like the standard that we have that, kind of for policing is like, whenever we have these bad outcomes, it's like, well, why does that happen? And it kind of
Yeah.
goes back to what we were talking about, the lack of administration backing cops to do training, them kind of also capping motivation for cops to do their job, um, poor academy standards, so on and so forth. And it's just, it's just kind of frustrating. But I will say there are some agencies out there that are doing it right and that are actually giving their cops the resources and, just like you said, giving them a stipend to train or time off. Now, um, where you work, are they really good about giving you guys opportunities to train and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we have a pretty cool facility. It's more like a campus, and for that, I mean, that was a fairly new addition to the last probably 3 years. That was a huge thing for us to actually have. We have an indoor range, we have a mat room, we have everything.
That's awesome.
So in terms of training, we do the minimum. We have a wellness program, which is pretty cool. So you get to work out for, and I bet if people listen to this, they're going to freak out. But when staffing permits, which is kind of tight right now, you do get to work out at the beginning, middle, or end of your shift, and I think it's about 45 minutes. So it's just one of those things where, and we have a really cool gym, and your wellness can be the gym. You can do, you can go for a run, whatever it is. And that's been huge. We really advocate for, we shoot 4 times a year, post minimum requirements once. So we do 4 quarters a year, which is pretty cool. We do a variety of, I mean, all kinds of stuff. I'm also a range master. I've been doing that for about 5 years. I love it. I love teaching. I love shooting. It's fun.
Yeah.
When I first started, range was pretty, it wasn't scary for me because I liked it, but it was scary for a lot of people who, I think the general public would be surprised at how many guys aren't gun guys that are cops. And
Oh, dude, a
so
lot, dude,
they
a
can
lot.
shoot, but they don't understand. Like, I mean, I'm borderline psychotic. I love that stuff. It's been a part of my life for a long time, and I enjoy it. And I could, talk about that for hours, but I truly enjoy it. So range was always, I was always excited, but there'd be guys who would be like, oh, I fucking hate the range. I'm going to screw up. I'm not going to qual. And then if they didn't pass, it was almost like it was worse the second time. So we put, a lot of effort into making sure that range was fun, because it should be. And two, we want to push people to where they feel uncomfortable. We want to push to failure. So we
Yes.
have, the quals are, I'd say they're challenging. I mean, they're not impossible. Um, we took away the time element a long time ago. So we used to have like a timed course. So now
Yeah.
it's
Most people
within
do.
reason. If you're shooting once every 30 seconds, yeah, we have a problem. But taking away the clock, but also, we can bring cars onto the range. We've had a couple of guys shoot the cars, but and they kind of, that's a real ego, a dent to your ego. But at the same time, no, that's training. This car got shot. Why? Let's talk about it. Let's see what happened to the car when we shot it. And it's all just really cool stuff that I think if most agencies pushed their people to the point of failure and not just success, they would be way better, um, overall, and their confidence would go through the roof. Because, I mean, even with our defensive tactics, we have a really good set of instructors, and they're all really good. The guy I talked about, who's super into jujitsu, he's been incorporating a ton of that. Um,
It's awesome.
it's just building that confidence to, if we could just get that verbal sort of synced in with all the physical stuff, I think we would have really good cops, not just for my agency, but nationwide. And it's finding it's time and it's money and it's energy.
It is.
That's hard.
It's
I mean, we have a lot, we have money to spend, but even with, it's sometimes there's not enough hours in the day.
yeah, and this is kind of where, not to shamelessly plug anything, but like with the EFC side of things, like yes, we have a curriculum, but the way that it's being taught and integrated into agencies is to take that time and money into consideration. More importantly, the time, right? Like, because the goal is how can we make an effective police officer with the minimal effective dose,
Hmm.
right? Because I use this equation often. So Dave, one of our coaches at EFT, he works for the Michigan State Police. He's their head. he's our head academy instructor there. Dude's an absolute unit of a man. No homo. But basically, so like we talk about skill and knowledge and ability, like, and possessing those things, and then that yielding true confidence. Like, I'm confident in my abilities, which is going to then yield more than likely a successful outcome, right? But it starts with that skill, knowledge, and ability. Like, if you don't possess those three things, the likelihood of you being confident is probably going to go down. And sometimes we have these guys who have like the fake confidence, right? We all know those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey man, like, your bark does not match the bite. Not that you have to bark really loud, but just know, like, when you ask somebody to do something, they don't do it. You understand that you're going to ask them one more time. And then after that, like, you need to make them do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not confident in the making portion, then you need to go get confident in that. So the self-assessment side of things is huge. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is literally looking in the mirror and objectively, and I use that word a lot, but like objectively looking at themselves and going, hey, what do I fucking suck at? Because I was in a situation where I went hands-on with the guy. He had a child support warrant, 2:00 in the morning by myself. And I was a relatively young cop, and he started to pull away. And it was kind of like the one time where I was by myself and the guy starts to pull away.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind just went like, you don't know what to do. Like, literally, like, I went to, like, I had no options, zero fucking options. It was terrifying. Luckily, my communication skills are really, really good. And I was able to communicate and actually talk him in handcuffs. I was like, hey man, sometimes dispatch fucks up and the warrant ain't right. You know, like,
Yeah.
and that's not usually the case, but you know, this could potentially, he was like, oh really? I was like, yeah, man, just for your safety in mind, you know, let's just do this. Hey man, if everything's cool, I'll let you go. We can be friends. He was like, yeah, all cool. Anyways, it came back. He had to go. But that next day I went to go train jujitsu because I objectively looked at myself and go, bro, you didn't know shit. Like, you didn't know nothing. Like, you were doing ring around the rosy with, he had his hand, you had his hand and handcuffs in this hand. And I had nothing. I had no idea what to do. Started training jujitsu. 7 years later, where I'm at now, I train cops in this, you know, obviously I help run a combatives company, and it's been game changing. I get text messages. My buddy Jeff, I was just telling you about, the canine sergeant. He sent me some stuff the other day about, hey bro, I used this technique, and dude, immediately got a response, worked perfect. I'm like, amazing, beautiful. Now he's only been training for a short period of time. He just got his first stripe on his white belt. So super short period of time. And, but again, it's that minimal effective dose. And I think people try to, sometimes there's so much out there, like in the shooting world, right? There's so many instructors, competition guys, tacticians. And it's like, sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially if you're not a gun guy, right? Or you're not a tactics guy, but it's like, hey, you knowing what you know, let me simplify this down to make it to where I can actually increase their skill, knowledge, and ability to then give them true confidence. I think once we realize like there's a process for that and we're using the best instruction and best method out there to train these cops, we're going to start seeing a change. Like, again, not to shamelessly plug EFC, but I'll give you a quick prime example. Grand Rapids, Michigan, about a year and a half ago, had a really bad use of force. And it was a traffic stop. I'm gonna give you the very Cliff Notes version. So basically, guy came out of the car, started to verbally disagree with the cop. The cop goes hands on to detain the guy. Obviously, starts to resist. Officer draws his taser. The guy's really close.
Is this the Congolese neighborhood? The
yes,
BMA.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've seen that video 100 times.
So he goes to grab his taser and then ends up being a contact shot to the back of the head because the individual's, you know, in possession of a less lethal tool. And so that situation occurred. Well, their command staff, even though it was justified, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Even though it was a justified shoot, their command staff was like, we need to make a change. So they reached out to Jay. Jay Wadsworth is our director at EFC, and we have taught 3 instructor classes there now. And in the past 12 months, 78% of their use of force have included our curriculum. Now, they've only had 3 instructor classes. So meaning they've only had 22 or 25 instructors total go through our course. But just in that time frame, in that 1 year, they've seen a massive reduction in officers being injured, suspects being injured, lawsuits, all this kind of stuff. And they're like, this is amazing. They did like a whole news article and stuff like that. But again, not to sing our own praises, but that just goes to show you, if you have the right curriculum with the right tools and the right people,
Hmm.
you can get a change relatively quickly. But again, it goes back to the command staff of, are they open-minded enough to accept change?
Yeah, that was I remember seeing that video and thinking, here we go again. This is going to be the next big one, and nothing happened, thankfully.
Right.
Um,
Correct.
Said and done, it was a good shoot, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, there's different fields of thought on the options, but I mean, I think one of the major things, depending on who you work for, so working for the county, and I don't know, I know that on the East Coast there's different, I think I'm using the wrong word, but parishes, county, all kinds of different like
No, I mean, there's,
departments.
so I think the parishes is mostly Louisiana.
Okay.
But here it's just, you have your city, your sheriff's offices, and your
Okay.
state law enforcement.
Yeah, I met some people like, I work for the like the whatever county police department. You're like, what is it, county or police? Like, oh, it's both. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
well,
So yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a few of those. I don't think there's any in South Carolina, but yes, those
okay,
do exist. FYI.
yeah. And working for a elected official and coming from a PD where I used to work, I went through 3 chiefs in 3 years. So that was a very bizarre.
That's,
Uh,
oh
and
Jesus.
looking at appointed people, and I always throw this out there to people who are looking to get into this job, and your agency that you apply for, it's a lot like a marriage. You are going to enter this relationship with this group of people, and they're going to have expectations of you that are going to be here, and you're going to have expectations of them that are going to be here, but they're going to be here, and you're never going to win that fight. And if you choose an agency that is already having issues with retention, training, all that stuff, nothing's going to change unless something happens that costs them money,
Agreed.
or something catastrophic. But I would say most agencies, PDs in particular, depending on where you are, a lot of them will just simply appease to what the what city council wants, or what some outreach groups want. And if people understood that the majority of what we do in training, especially, and I've talked about this before, where we have DTAC and range,
Mhm.
and DTAC's lacking. Range is probably the more, I guess, concentrated training point, and it should be, because range is, it's guns, obviously, but for every shooting we have, there's probably 50 to 1,000 uses of force, depending on the size of your agency, to include blue team entries, all this stuff that we're dealing with. And for whatever reason, that always kind of gets the back seat. And I feel like if there was a sort of shared interest nationally, that there is a lot to be said, not even about DTAC, but just de-escalation. A lot of people hate that word, but it's a word that we've been using and doing that. We've been doing that for forever. De-escalation is going to be here until the end of time, and it's not, you know, the traditional, when we think about it, the traditional sense of it, but more so just being able to talk to someone and to have the ability to, like your story with the cuffing. If you don't have that, you're going to be the next big show, or your agency will be, because you just don't know. But if they don't know, then we can't fault them for that, especially this new group of kids, where they're going to basically I guess the way I put it once before was, for us, when we started, boss says jump, we say how high. And with this new group, you say jump, they're going to say, well, what do I get if I jump? And
Yeah.
there
Or
needs to
why?
be a,
Yeah.
yeah, there needs to be a why or a reason, or they're not going to,
Right.
and they won't do it until they're told to. So it's that weird combination of, how do we incorporate, training where it's needed, not just where it's popular, and ditching techniques that are, the whole thing with, like what you talked about with, dude, I'm a huge gun guy. There's a short list of people that I recommend, because there's too many of them doing the
There's
same
so
thing.
many of them, dude.
So I will just
Oh
say,
man.
hey, someone will ask me, hey, who should I, what podcast, what I'll give them here's 5. Look at these people. And our whole thing with the range program is, and we pride ourselves on this, because a lot of other agencies near us, it's their way or no way. And there's 10 ways to skin a cat. We will show you a way. There are some things that we will say, no, you can't do that on our range, but it's very seldom that we tell someone no, short of it being unsafe or just out of policy.
Sure.
But the gun community, well, the law enforcement gun community, I feel like just it's everyone has a way to do something, but if you ask the instructor, this is the only way you should do it, and that creates that narrow scope to where the kid that's still learning, he's going to take that video of, I'm not going to name drop, but just pick a popular one, and
Sure.
that's going to be their way of thinking. And then you hear them regurgitating it, but they don't understand it. They're
Right.
repeating a sentence, but they don't know the application.
Yeah, they don't know the why behind it. And that's just kind of
Exactly.
why it's so important to explain the why. Like, you know, we talk about you being a gun guy and then like the DD community, right? Like there is in some agencies, there's a clear delineation between the two. Like you have your gun guys and you have your DT guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like at ESC, what we always talk about is situations are so fluid and so it happens so fast that you can go from a hands-on situation to a gun situation back to a hands-on situation in seconds.
Absolutely.
So you need to be both. You need to be not only a gun guy, you also need to be a DT guy because you have the guys, oh well, I'll just shoot him. Oh, I'll just go hands-on. It's like, yeah, but the situation may call for you to potentially do both. Or it may call for you to create space. Are you fast? Do you have good agility? It may require you to jump out of your passenger seat because your driver's seat's fucking pinned. Can you get out of your fucking patrol car, out of your fucking passenger seat? You ask a lot of guys and they'll tell you no because they got a fucking duffel bag right
Yeah.
there in the fucking passenger seat and they
Yep.
can't cross that for shit. Right. And so it's like, well, damn, I never thought about that. Well, why would I need to do that? Well, this is why. Right. And so explaining that why to the younger generation, I think is super important. And this is why, like, guys are like, oh, this is the way we're doing it. And it's like, just like you said, well, like, why though? And it's okay. I ask why all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but again, after I ask the why and they give their explanation, then, I likely have enough experience to where I can say, okay, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense. Or I can say, hey, I think that's a great point you're making. Right. And so, I I always try to tell guys like be really good at the gun stuff, but also be really good at the DT stuff because they go hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
They like because this job, society expects perfection. You're supposed to
Oh
be a
yeah.
professional driver, negotiator, attorney, medical guy, firearm tactician. You're supposed to be perfect, and you're not because there's not, just like you said, there's not enough hours in the day to do all that stuff. So time management super important. The quality of the training super important. Then how it's integrated within the agency, and it can obviously continuing education is some which
Yeah.
is
Education. Yeah.
which is huge. You know,
I didn't get my bachelor's till I was 37, 6.
good for you, man.
Yeah, but that was when I could afford it and when I
Yeah,
took the plunge. But it was funny because and you mentioned kind of, well, what prompted all this, and we didn't really talk about this before, but I had just kind of a weird series of events that ultimately led me to pursue something. So I started to do the blog, I started to do the podcast came later, but it came from kind of this weird detachment. And you talked about the stuff that we see on the job earlier, and that's a really weird thing to talk to the new group about because they have a hard enough time talking as it is.
right.
So I think with all that training we talk about, and I'm lucky. My agency does a pretty good job of um, acknowledging that, but also it was because of certain things that happened, to include employee death and employee suicide, that changed a lot of that for people to go, oh shit, this could actually happen to us, because you hear about it happening to other people, other agencies. And I always tell people, especially newer guys, it's not a matter of if, it is when it will happen to you. And when you have that, all it takes is one call to change your perspective, to
100%.
alter your ability to
Life.
do something.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could be something as simple as a car accident. People, like, if you got in a pretty bad wreck, that's going to affect you mentally for months, maybe even years. And it's not something that you're going to think about all the time. But compare that to a shooting or a scenario where, I don't know, pick your poison. A kid dies in your arm after a car accident. And we're inherently told that, hey, this is part of the job and it's this normal. And it is a part of the job. But how you choose to um, process those is going, or all of those events is on par, in my opinion, with anything else we do, education wise, training wise. And there's only a few um, agencies and only a few. I think it kind of depends on who you talk to. California is pretty we're good in that regard, I think, in addressing things, but there's still some old school agencies where, I went to a seminar last year, and this guy was out of Texas, and he went to his supervisor and had some concerns over a call that he had, and they mailed him a pink pair of panties. Now, that in
Wow.
itself just kind of goes to
Wow.
show, like, just kind of how cynical we
Wow.
are. And that was years
Yeah,
ago, but
dude.
it's
That's
still,
that's
it's
brutal.
just,
That's fucking
it
brutal,
is.
man.
And you have the guys who are like, no, no, it's fine. Like, we don't talk about it, we don't address it. But those are the scenarios where, if you think about kind of that internal drive, where if someone screws up, and we've all had cases or calls where you make a mistake and it didn't ruin someone's life, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, I really fucked that up. And this person's going to probably hate my name forever. Even the small things like that will eventually, if you don't do something about it. And I feel like the smaller incidents are affecting these, I keep calling them kids, but the new group of cops, they're a lot less resilient to, I guess, life experience. I think that, if you were
Yeah.
born in the 80s and you grew up in the 90s, you had a different upbringing, different
We didn't have
mindset.
cell phones, bro. We didn't have cell
Yeah,
phones. Like
no,
I didn't have cell phones. So like my exposure was life. Getting punched in the face, like yes, it happened when I was a lot younger. Like it didn't happen, on the job, right?
yeah,
And so like violence wasn't new to me. Like, obviously like the whole like shooting and tactics and stuff, yeah, that was
sure,
new, right? But like the act of self-preservation or helping others was something that like I just did, right? And so I kind of want to touch on one topic because I was having a conversation with with Dr. Huberman, and I was trying to talk to him about now this wasn't specific to cops per se, but it was perceived stress on like level of knowledge or like ability of to do something. So whether you're like a surgeon or you're a cop, whatever the case may be, does one's level of training or intelligence change their perspective on perceived stress, whether it's short term stress or long term stress.
interesting,
And I believe what he said, and please don't quote me on this, but it was something like it does. It plays a major factor because stress is so subjective, right? It's like it's like you said, it could be a car accident, it could be a child dying in your arms, it could be a piece of a person on the side of the road, like it just
hmm
that could be a trigger. But as it pertains to like because my approach to that was more like the use of force side of things. Like, why are cops like, why are they screaming during uses of force? Not even like with shots being fired, just like going hands on. They're screaming. They have no idea what they're doing. They kind of just go black, right? They just see red or whatever the case may be. And he was like, yeah, no, it definitely plays a role in perceived stress. And this is why we promote stuff like training jujitsu because you're in uncomfortable positions for an extended period of time, sometimes multiple times a week. And, it shows like it's super clear. We've seen body cam footage of guys that train that are highly skilled, highly trained guys and guys that are not highly trained and that maybe they rely on just on their agency, uh, like just like their in-service training, and it's like night and day. And it's like, well, man, well, this guy is probably going to be totally cool after this
hmm
freaking incident, even if the guy was armed with a gun or a weapon, simply because he's been there 1,000 fucking times this year alone in a training environment. So this is
yeah,
why like high quality training, even for younger guys, like, and again, we keep saying younger guys, but like, newer officers, I'm always like, look, which is super cool because I teach a free law enforcement class every Wednesday. And I would say the majority of them are younger cops. Like I would say probably 3 years or less.
well,
Right. And it's weird because it's a weird demographic. So it's either 3 years or less or 12 years or more. It's like the 4 to like 10 range where they're just like, I'm fucking good. Like it's like, yeah, but I've seen your body cam footage and you're fucking not.
hmm
like, and this is the thing is like a lot of those guys are my friends. And I'm like, hey man, you should definitely come to this class. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, dude, like, you know, what's up? And I'm like, dude, like, you should definitely come to this class. He's like, no, man, I think I'm good. I'm like, I know you can't fight, but that's cool, man. I just, kind of taking those stabs. But anyways, bro, that was kind of my rant about like training and perceived stress there because there is a direct correlation there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I think confrontation is a word that I like to use a lot. And if you confront things that you are uncomfortable with or even afraid of, you won't be afraid of them. And even like the stuff about yelling and just the small things that you can do, especially when you do it, or you kind of, I don't know, break down tape after the fact and you look at, oh wow, I was so calm. I was, I had a really, you know, good voice. I wasn't freaking out. And I feel like if you eliminate the fear, and you introduce uncomfortable scenarios, that they will be stronger. The brain is designed, it's like a muscle. It's supposed to do that. And the more fucked up shit you do, the more confident you will be at the next one and the next one and the next one. And I'm 13 years on, but like I know most cops think this way, but you never stop learning. And if
Bro,
the
you
day you
never.
stop, yeah, you'll fail
Yeah,
the day
no,
you
that
stop.
no, man, and this is, I'm gonna kind of toot your horn for a second. This is why I really appreciate what you do with the Zen Cop page. I think it's a very unique approach, because not many people approach the profession like you do and the way you approach it. And so I think this is why you're very different. You're very unique in that way. And this is also why I was intrigued to follow you. And again, I'm very grateful that you have me on your podcast and on your platform. Um, and again, dude, I'm looking forward to the future, what you do with this, with, with this thing that you're doing. I think it's great and very unique. And I think and I can't wait for you to grow, man. Cause this is a very important message that people need to hear, I think.
Cool, man. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I think this is a
Of
good
course.
place to call it. Thanks for being my first guest, and thanks for all the
Anytime, man.
knowledge. If you guys don't know, go ahead and rattle off your the links or hats or
Yeah.
whatever you want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
share.
Yeah. So I'll keep it quick. Make sure you guys check out EF Combatives on Instagram. We post a lot of good content on there. We have some free stuff. We have like some free handcuffing and searching guides and stuff like that. You guys can download with some videos, and hopefully that helps there. On the fitness side, we have effective fitness training on Instagram. We have a plethora of free opt-ins on nutrition, how to survive night shift, um, workouts, mid shift mobility, so on and so forth. You guys can check that out. You can download all that stuff. And also, we have the program as well. And of course, if you guys want to follow Police Post, feel free. Just don't say any fucking thing stupid, because we like to block people. That again, the goal is to improve the profession and have beneficial discussion. Also, have fun. We like to be savage, and we like to, we like memes and things like that. But at the same time, the goal is to improve the profession and the people in it. And that's super important to us. So, Mac, I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you for allowing me to be your first. And I wish you all the best.
Cool, man. Thank you. Thanks, guys. We'll be back again next week. See you soon. Cool, dude.